In 2001, a friend of mine went to New York and he went to see a band, just going down the stairs to the basement where this band was playing, and he could hear the famous sound of the Fender Rhodes coming from the band. And then he got in the club and, looked at the stage and went, I can't see it. Where's he could hear it, couldn't see it. The answer is there was a little red keyboard on stage made by the Swedish company Clavinet, and it was called the Nord Electro, and it represented a major boon in keyboard playing. Now, what Nord have done, or Clavinet, Nord is the sort of trade name, and I've got the Nord Electro Rack 2, so it's only the second edition of this, and I bought this in 2003. The reason I'm showing you this is because it works absolutely perfectly, and the sounds really do stand up to all the plugins and all the other emulations that have been done since then. And it's an extremely usable keyboard. There's no menus to sift through, it's just control knobs like the original keyboard players would have had when they were using these things. So it really does sort of hark back to the days of all these classic instruments, but it only weighs, a few hundred grams. I bought this one to go touring with, so I could take something on the plane that had Rhodes, piano, Hammond, everything in one thing, and just connect a MIDI keyboard up the other end. There is a USB plug on this, but that is just for the updating of the sounds, which you could do downloading other Fender Rhodes or a different piano. Only a little limited amount of memory here, but once you've got your sounds, you just take it out with you. So you don't need internet, you don't need any connectivity at all, apart from a MIDI cable and an old piano. Perfect. So that Rhodes that my friend listened to in that club in New York was the Rhodes 2 setting here, and it sounds like this. It's really good, really good. Now, at the moment, I've got the overdrive control on, which is a global effect that applies to any of the instruments, and I've just got a little bit of drive on. So it just crunches it up, but if you want it clean, then we're all there. There's a bass and treble control, which is global. There's also a presence control, which is more of a sort of swept mid, really, but you can get that sort of really sort of tiny, tiny, I mean, by the Rhodes tines going through a guitar amp. And some people used to use Fender Rhodes through a little Fender amp, little guitar amp, just to get a bit more presence in the studio and make it cut through the mix a bit better, so you can do that as well. There are some effects built in here. We've got chorus, flanger and phaser, two versions of each. The ones marked 2 here are stereo, and just the standard phaser would be mono, for example. Phaser 2 is just a slightly different effect. Doesn't say what sort of phaser it is, because frankly it doesn't matter. It sounds good. The flanger, flanger 2, chorus, and chorus 2. Now, the thing about all of this on here is that it's buttons, no menus, no sort of inbuilt sort of, all this sort of stages of menus which make it difficult to find things, and you can't vary the depth of the chorus or however much of this is. It doesn't matter. You have rate and amount. That's all you need. So amount and rate. Fine. These are all memory control knobs, so when you store your patch it will be as you left it. Perfect. And we also have some modulations, some wah-wah, tremolo and pan, and a ring modulator, which is quite fun. Yeah, great. Now the wah-wah works, and I know that it works, with the Boss series of expression pedals. So if you're looking for an expression pedal for the Nord, the Boss ones work fine with a stereo lead just connecting the two things. And the wah-wah that's built in here is fantastic. It's just a standard sort of crybaby wah. There's also something called wah-wah 2, which is an automatic wah that just has a constant sort of up-down rate. You know, I think those Led Zeppelin keys sound there. Once again, rate and amount. And we have an auto wah thing as well, like the sort of, those sort of famous Dodd auto wah, those green pedals that we all know and love. So you have a rate, which sets the sort of trigger level, and then the amount. So that's the Rhodes. Now, leaving the effects aside for the moment, we've got 5 other electromechanical keyboards on here. The instruction manual for the original Nord is well worth a read, because it really does describe the original instruments and a history of them. And I think it's really important, especially sort of newer generations, or younger generations of people who don't really know what the original ones, they don't know how they were made or the sounds that they sort of produced, apart from just listening to it through a Nord. So although the sounds here, I think it's hard to tell, really hard to tell. So the other Rhodes is a very soft one. And you can apply your effects to that. Then we've got the Wurlitzer piano, the Wurlitzer P-200. You just dial up the sound and it just comes out of the box and you think, oh yeah, quite like that. You don't need to tweak things, and indeed, when you have more variables, it makes you more fussy, and actually you don't get into the actual playing and the enjoyment of the sound that you're getting. So it's important in so many ways to have something like this, which is just control knobs. Electric Grand, the Yamaha CP-80, look it up. There's a grand piano used by Elton John, Jules Holland, all sorts of people. Now, at the bottom of the piano here, it simulates the sound that you get from the low notes of a CP-80, or indeed a piano, where the strings are slightly out of tune because of the harmonic balance. And it's very faithfully reproduced here. The acoustic grand piano. Now, out of the box came a stereo grand piano. It was just a Steinway Model D, I think. But I opted for the upright piano sound, which you can get from Nord's website. And it's much, I think, everyone goes on about grand piano being the be-all and end-all on your recordings, and actually it depends, it really does depend. The upright piano sound here is very good. Now, some people who use these piano sounds on stage do say that there's not really enough mid-range or enough sort of bottom end, but that's partly because they're expecting to hear an actual piano, which is a bit of wood and steel. When you record a piano, it's very different. However, you can use the presence control in the middle you can use the presence control in addition to your bass and treble, just to give you a little bit more punch there. Now, before we move on to the organ sound, which is fantastic, some people would say, where's the reverb control? And the answer is there isn't one. Now, that might annoy some people, but if you're in a studio, stick reverb on it. If you're out live, you've got to be questioning why you'd be using lots of reverb in the first place in a big room with a pair of PA speakers. In addition to the fact that the Rhodes and the Wurli and the pianos didn't have reverb on them in the first place. So I can forgive the fact that there's no reverb. There are reverb controls on later Nord Electro. We're up to Nord Electro 6, I think, now. And it just continues on in the same vein, the same generation of this really careful attention to detail. No strings or brass sounds or anything like that on this. You get 7 sounds, 6 electromechanical ones, and then we get the Hammond. Now, we have a set of drawbars here, which are these sort of virtual button ones. And I know some people don't really like that very much, but actually they function perfectly well. You just press the up button to bring the drawbar back in, and the down button to bring it back out. And you have several user settings of your drawbars, as you did on the original Hammond organ, with those reverse coloured keys on the left-hand side. Also, with the Hammond, we get the Rotary speaker simulator that's built into the Nord Electro, and by default it's on when you switch the Hammond on, but you don't need to have it on if you don't want to. You can get that 60s sort of just speakers sound. So here is the Hammond. The expression pedal I used for the wah-wah just now defaults to swell for the Hammond. Now, because a Hammond is not touch sensitive, you need to control the volume by other means. You can either tweak the master level on your left hand or output level on your right hand. There are differences between output level and master level, and I'll go through those in just a second. So, the volume pedal works fine with this. And then the drawbars. And that really is rather spectacular, I hope you'll agree. So with the Hammond, you get all the usual toys with it. You get the fast and slow on your rotary speaker. And you can stop the rotor as well, as you can on a real Leslie cabinet. Or you can switch it off. For that all sort of 50s and 60s sort of Hammond, which was a bit less sort of movie about, a bit more plain. You can hear the click there. That is a feature on the original Hammond. Now, while there is no definitive click on or off, Nord in their manual say just turn the treble down. And actually that works fine, because the treble is quite a high frequency on this. But the click does give you some cutting over the mix, in addition to your percussion sound, which you can have second or third harmonic, soft or slow, or a combination of those things. And vibrato, the vibrato chorus scanner that was a feature of the Hammond organ. That's different from Leslie, and you can actually have both. And there we go, and we get not only the standard C3 setting that we all know from the Hammond, but you can get the vibrato ones from the original organ as well. So if I go to V3, it's vibrato as opposed to the chorus. So everything is provided, the works. You can even split your keyboard into the lower and upper manuals of a Hammond. So it's all there. The only thing that's not quite there is the bass sound, the bass pedals sound of a Hammond, but you can actually use the lower manual, and if I press this button, the drawbar setting now governs what happens on the lower manual instead. And the vibrato is also selectable on either manual as well, as on the original Hammond. The Leslie is global though, because that's where the sound goes from the console. So I've got something where I can actually set a bass sound that's quite plain. Now this is the lower manual though, so if I go lower than this C, it sort of goes back up an octave. So actually, to get used to playing a bass line that's just between two Cs, it's very good practice anyway. And it just means you don't have to wander about while you're trying to solo with your right hand. You can just wander with your bass just in an octave and have all the rest for your solo hand. So there we go. That is the Nord Electro. Those are the sounds available. You can also have the rotary speaker on your Fender Rhodes. Now they thought about this because, you know, Hendrix put his guitar through a rotary, a Leslie speaker. Why can't you stick a Fender Rhodes through there? So without and with. The number of sounds you can get on this, really, the possibilities are endless. So the output level on the right hand side here, what that does is it sets the overall level for the sound you're using, and that can be stored. So the master level on the left hand side here simply is the output level of the actual bit of kit to your PA system, whereas the output level here, if I was to change one of my settings, I'd hear my sound again, because obviously I stored a different output level there. So you can do things like transposing, you can tune it, fine tune it, you can set the MIDI channel, you can also set the lower channel if you are using two manuals for your Hammond. So you don't have to split one keyboard, you can actually use two keyboards on this. And there we go. I thoroughly recommend this bit of kit because it is completely future-proof. It'll always sound like this. It won't depend on any operating system or any upgrades or any inbuilt obsolescence. Don't know if that exists, but it will essentially withstand the test of time just as the original instruments did.